Come, let us open with depression and conclude with Tantric Chanting to help us meditate like a Jedi. A good-hearted person is looking for advice. And they wrote, "Hello, can anyone recommend meditation for helping with depressive symptoms?" So we're going to start right there. I'm going to begin with something rather controversial. Oh, good morning, let me see if I can pronounce this. Marv I. Good morning. So, what if there were no psychological disorders, but merely psychological symptoms of physiological disorders? That's not splitting hairs. There's a huge difference. For instance, if some guy was slashed across his eyes by a blade and rendered blind, and the doctor said, well, it's all in your head, you need to see a psychologist, he would squander years when the problem was physiological. So in the description area below this live stream, there's a bunch of free stuff. I'm going to look at some of that with you right now. I'm going to, let's see, tap button 7. Okay, so there's a bunch of free stuff. And I'm going to scroll through that quickly. So, Dr. Michael Greger, MD, is a specialist. His specialty is meta-analysis. And when you poke around his page, you'll find, if you look up depression, you'll see a really interesting study that compares the symptoms of depression with the symptoms of systemic inflammation. There's an old song that the mysteries of biology only make sense when viewed through the lens of evolution. So what are the evolutionary advantages to becoming withdrawn from others socially and withdrawn from our own interests when one is experiencing systemic inflammation? And the answer is it slows infection throughout the community and it allows the body to marshal its resources. Therefore, we can see that when we take someone who is presenting with symptoms of depression and treat them for systemic inflammation without any talk therapy, typically within the week, all the symptoms of depression fade. That does not mean depression is imaginary. It means it is a mislabeling of psychological symptoms of a physiological disorder. There is an old adage, let me know if you've heard this. When the dog barks up the wrong tree, the hunter's family goes hungry. We only have so much time, we only have so much energy, we only have so much money. If we squander them in the wrong direction, we can harm ourselves. I'm not an MD, but there's a link here in the description area below the video. Find a doctor for PCRM, and they will help you find an MD who has spent his continuing education studying lifestyle medicine hacks, including the effect of a whole food vegan diet upon many maladies, including systemic inflammation. This is an excellent place to begin. Let's return now to the question. Can anyone recommend meditation for helping with depressive symptoms? Would you advise meditating on compassion? Doing short, frequent shamatha and vipassana meditations and contemplating impermanence, but I'm still struggling to not be slovenly and avoidant, which is exacerbating the suffering, even though I don't notice any sensations in my body causing this suffering. Okay, excellent. Let's explore that. I want to make sure this is appearing on the screen properly, and it's not, because sometimes I'm a boob. Let's go back over to button 7. Wrong one. Okay, let's hit button 8. There we go. So that's on me. I'll reread that. The individual writes, "Hello, can anyone recommend meditation for helping with depressive symptoms? Would you advise meditating on compassion? I'm doing short, frequent shamatha and vipassana meditations and contemplating impermanence, but I'm still struggling to not be slovenly and avoidant, which is exacerbating the suffering, even though I do not notice any sensations in my body causing this suffering. Want to break out of this rut, break out of this rut, so I can use some of my be of use to my fellow beings. Any advice is welcome." Okay, so let's explore this in greater detail. So to do that, I'm going to tap button 9 this time. And we'll take a look at this through the lens of neuroscience. Got to fight the right button. Here we go. Okay. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, including human beings, including meditation teachers. In humans, that suckiness looks like us getting stuck in our survival instincts that, when overused, drive us to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. This rigidity, these controlling tendencies, rear their scabby heads in spiritual circles by driving us to overwork our medial prefrontal cortex by actively focusing, and to overwork our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex by overanalyzing. Now, does that mean we shouldn't think? No, thinking is great, but there are sustainable ways to use our brain and unsustainable ways to use our brain. And overworking this region will so exhaust us that we could begin presenting with symptoms of depression. If we already have depression, those symptoms could exacerbate. We could not only fatigue this part of the brain but we could do so to the point where we begin accidentally triggering our amygdala, the seat of anxiety and aggression. So 90% of humans are stuck with this, including about 90% of meditation teachers. And they might have fancy terms. They might call it samatha or vipassana. They might call it concentration. They might call it contemplation. And they might say, hey, look, I found an old book where these words are written, and therefore it must be true. The greatest Buddhist luminaries have always insisted not to be a victim of blind faith, nor of pseudo-intellectual mental gymnastics. but instead have a very pragmatic approach. The approach of someone practicing the scientific method. Or if you're a friend, if you're a niece or nephew of Karl Marx, someone practicing dialectic materialism, which is just a fancy way of saying decide what you want, take action, notice your results, based on those results, modify future actions. Lather, rinse, repeat. When we are so rigid and fearful and superstitious and controlling and elitist and cryptic, competitive and cruel, the idea of brutally examining the results we're generating with the specter of reevaluating our previous assumptions is horrifying. And so these people, for themselves and for their students, can persist in forever overworking the front of their brain and triggering our amygdala. These are the people who will notice, well, you know, this amygdala is the seat of anxiety and aggression, and I'm getting more anxious and more aggressive. Therefore, I'll just do more concentration and more contemplation. What's that? I'm feeling cranky? Well, then I'll contemplate love. That should do it, at least on paper, but not in experience. Trying to use contemplation to increase our love is like trying to put out a brush fire with a bucket of gasoline. Well, that sucks. What are we going to do? Simple. We're going to rely more intelligently, more strategically upon our central nervous system. Consider this. Oh, wait a second. So consider this. Our autonomic nervous system is the equipment of our Buddha nature. What is a healthier alternative to being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel? Simple. Choosing the opposite. Being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Well, how do we do that? Those tendencies are already hardwired into our autonomic nervous system. We don't have to force our autonomic nervous system to do anything. We have squandered our lives habitually competing against our autonomic nervous system. And that is exhausting. Instead, we can cooperate with it. Here's how. Every time we inhale, we are already wired to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord, described as our sympathetic nervous system. It is evolved to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. It is evolved to notice all manner of phenomena. It is evolved to notice from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. It is evolved to notice mind's antics of perception, emotion, intention, cognition, recollection, and imagination. But what do we do with all that which we noticed? Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we are already wired to automatically access the top bit and the bottom bit of that same spinal cord, which is known as the parasympathetic nervous system. It is evolved to help us to physically relax to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, and less defining, and as non-graspable as a vast empty void, like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although could be tantalizing to the eye, It's non-graspable to the hand. The more we cooperate with with both facets of our autonomic nervous system, the more our amygdala is calmed, the more our anxiety and aggression are calmed, the more the front of our brain gets to rest and rejuvenate and recover from its exhaustion. The more we find that our anterior cingulate gyrus is gently stimulated, thus causing us to experience the highest love, which is the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of watching and resting in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. Sounds good, sounds great, sign me up. How do we do that? Simple. Of course, there's great irony of saying, how do I actively forsake active competition against my autonomic nervous system and passively cooperate with it? For those of us indoctrinated into being controlling, passivity seems like poison. It seems incomprehensible. Fortunately, I've got a hack for you because I'm just as damaged as you, maybe more. Here's the hack. When we silently and mentally recite the verb watch during every time we feel our lungs subtly swell with inhalation, we're automatically cooperating with our sympathetic nervous system. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb rest, every time we feel our lungs subtly sink as gently we exhale, we are automatically cooperating with our parasympathetic nervous system. In his greatest treatise, the great Buddhist reformer Trahe Vajra, known in Tibet as Garab Dorje, taught that the most effective meditation is so simple it looks impotent. And yet a close examination of the Buddha's original teachings of the 7 enlightenment factors infers that this was always the Buddha's technique. So here is the great sorrow. And wherever there are humans gathered for any purpose, whether that purpose is spiritual or secular or vocational or recreational or social, a significant proportion are still going to act as if they were puppets of being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. And so what we saw happen in the history of Buddhism is first there was proto-Buddhism and everything was super simple and super effective. And then in time there was a metamorphosis. And then we saw institutional Buddhism, where everything was slow and clunky and difficult and ugly and rigid. There is a story, it may be true, it may be archetypical, that the Buddha had a foolish cousin named Devadatta, and Devadatta was really good at being manipulative and conniving, and he caused a schism within the Sangha. He caused a schism amongst the Buddha's nuns and monks and lay practitioners and patrons. And so he stole about half of them and went off, formed his own community. But he couldn't hold on to those patrons or lay practitioners or nuns or monks because although he was really good at being divisive, he wasn't really good at mastering, no less teaching, the spiritual path. We see that happen across many disciplines in many institutions where there's a founder who's wise and loving, and they either die eventually or they're pushed out of their own organization by people who are just hungry for power and prestige. And what's left behind is a flaccid analog of the original teachings. And so we see that in many disciplines, including Buddhism. So let's explore that further. I'm going to tap button 7 again. Whoops, button 8. That should do it. Would you advise meditating on compassion? So when we're depressed, contemplation is not going to help. We need to be compassionate towards our own bodies. Depression is a symptom of systemic inflammation, which has many causes. There are environmental causes. There are behavioral causes. Traumas can cause systemic inflammation. Trauma changes our physiology. There is no reset button on the human body. That doesn't mean trauma has to destroy us or control us, but it does change our central nervous system and our peripheral nervous system and our endocrine system. These symptoms are not purely psychological. They are psychological symptoms of physiological changes. So remember, the highest love is the spontaneous and uncontrived fringe benefit or byproduct of mindfulness and meditation. So short, frequent practices of concentration and contemplation are not going to help. Give the front part of your brain a rest. It's panting like a dog that's been chasing a ball for half an hour. And instead, practice the Buddha's method of cooperating with our autonomic nervous system to passively watch and rest. Contemplating impermanence is not going to help. We cannot think our way out of our emotions. Trying to think our way out of our emotions is a very efficient way of exhausting our brain and making everything worse. I'm still struggling not to be slovenly. A wise Chan Shifu once instructed his students, when you are weary, rest. When you are hungry, eat. Which is the opposite advice that one might receive from someone prone to asceticism. We need to respect our bodies. Think of it this way. I'm going to work blue for a minute. Remember life in junior high. I really like Robin Williams' definition of puberty, which is when Mother Nature taps us on the shoulder and says, hey, it's time to shake hands with Mr. Happy. No one has to tell an adolescent that they should be horny. They are. They can't help it. It's their wiring. Come to life. It's the price of puberty, being a horn dog. But there are times when we're really, really tired or really, really stressed, where indulging our horn dog tendencies is not appealing. It's less appealing. If there are times when we're too tired or stressed out for sex, then it should not surprise us that there will be times when we are too tired or exhausted to meditate. If you do not have the oomph to sit in meditation, then give yourself a break. Rest. Listen to your body's many needs. Your body needs water. Your body needs sunshine. Your body needs fresh air. Our bodies need exercise. Our bodies need a whole, fresh, organic fruits and veggies. And if you, like me, are on a budget, you can actually, through the cunning use of an Instant Pot or a slow cooker, you can cook rice and beans and veggies super cheap, super healthy, super delicious. All these things can be nurturing for our bodies, which is why the first thing I did was I showed you those links for those MDs who can help. So in conclusion, this person says or writes, I want to break out of this rut so I can be of use to my fellow beings. So that's noble intention, but it smacks of bad advice. We have been told that, depression is just stinking thinking. It's just a habit. No, it's not. It's a system of systemic inflammation. And it serves the biological function of getting us to rest, because rest is the ally of our immune system. And when we do not give our immune system the sufficient rest it requires, bad things happen. So I can be of use to my fellow beings. Being sick does not make us a villain. Having an infection does not make us lazy. Having an infection does not make us a burden to our friends and neighbors. If people treat you like a burden or say that they are a burden, then that's on them. They're not well. They're not loving. They're not wise. Here's the cool thing. By putting this advice into action, finding an MD who's had a significant amount of continuing education on the subject of lifestyle medicine, learning to cooperate with our own autonomic nervous system is going to help us to help others who are going through the same thing. 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 1 year from now, when this is all behind us, we'll be able to tell people what we went through so that they might know what to do, and so they might suffer less. Our hardships can mitigate the hardships of others when we are wise and loving. So a question could be asked, well, if there's a wrong way to use the front of my brain, what's the right way? How am I to know? So here's the cool thing. The more we sit and breathe and watch and rest, the more our choices, utterances, and deeds could flow from love's centered spontaneity. This is Wu Wei. This is going with the flow. This is the effortless effort. That is the sixth-fold of the Buddha's eightfold path. The more we allow our watching and resting to inform our intuition, the more we'll just automatically choose and say and do the sustainable thing. So let's ask, I'm going to check, someone wrote some questions. I'm going to check them real quick. Let's see here. So there is a very popular tendency amongst some people to practice hyperventilation. The problem with that is that it triggers our fight and flight response, which is the opposite of peace, the opposite of love. Superficially, in the short term, repeatedly accessing our fight and flight system could seem like a viable antidote. However, in the long term, it does much more harm than good. There is a sect within a sect of Buddhism that uses Tumo breathing or Shantali breathing. It was designed to make us peaceful, not trigger our fight and flight response. There is a popular European teacher who abuses these teachings, and his only metric is, does it keep him warm in the winter? Well, there are many things that keep us warm in the winter. Setting ourselves on fire is going to keep us warm in the winter, but it's sure as hell not sustainable. Accessing our fight and flight response is going to exhaust our endocrine system, and it's going to do much more harm than good. We must, those MDs who really study meta-analysis can tell you that when using experiments to evaluate a technique, it's good to evaluate them in the short term, but they must also be evaluated not just over hours, but over days and months and years and decades. That's why there are some longitudinal studies that literally measure as many factors as possible over the duration of multiple decades to tease out the long-term effects of things, because quite often something which seems promising in the short term is destructive in the long term. Let's see. Having completed our opening lesson, let us now shift gears. It is Obi-Wan Kenobi Wednesday early morning, or at least it is for me here in Southern California. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after about 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is the Dzogchen Semde Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've harnessed my autistic special interests as well as my ADHD hyperfocus to spend about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that I can become your personal, nerdy, neurodivergent guide to nirvana. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. For the majority of the remainder of this morning's live stream, let us sit and breathe and watch the antics of mind and then rest into their non-graspable nature. Pardon me. I'd like to return to the opening lesson, if I may. When one reads the Satipatthana Sutta, the middle-length discourse on the four bases of mindfulness, one learns that such ideas of physical or mental agitation or physical or mental fatigue. The patriarchal view is to fight against these things. The matriarchal point of view is to simply watch these things and rest. So as we relax into our exhalation, whatever frenzy or fatigue we might have noticed during our inhalation could feel as if they were melting into the simplicity of just sensation, just a physical state, just a mental state. So we watch as we breathe in, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, fleetingly. We rest as we breathe out. And we can take any sight, sound, sensation, flavor, scent. We can take any emotion, intention, thought, memory, or imagining as something to notice and something to release. We're not shoving things away. We're not reaching for something. That's just more duality. We're just watching and resting. And when our body says, hey, it's time to sit, we sit. And when our body says, hey, it's time to lay down, we lay down. Some people like walking meditation. Some walk slowly, some walk briskly. Which is right? Whatever works for you best in the moment. Our needs are always changing. We must be flexible. Let us return to the abuse of breath holding. Breath holding might change the way we feel in a moment, but it will not reverse systemic inflammation. Bone tapping might change the way we feel in a moment, but it will not reverse systemic inflammation. If we do not sustainably cooperate with our body, it will end in tears. Back in the 70s, when I was a child, there was a commercial. You can pay me now, or you can pay me later. We ignore our bodies' many cries at our peril. So, a quick note for those. Oops, I appear to have frozen. Okay, so a quick note for Morve. The chat is for you to ask questions about Buddhist or Taoist philosophy or meditation. I find it useful to seal the practice of meditation with mantra recitation, not for wish fulfillment, just as a physical tonic. I'm disabled and I have to use every trick in the book to teach as often as I do. You're welcome to join me if you wish. If you are on the Clock app, you may wish to join me on the Tube app because there's going to be some recitations. If you're already on the Tube app, you're in the right place. I invoke the love that Tade spiritually liberates, and to Tade physically rescues as well as Tade blesses. So may all beings master this dynamism. So Om Tade Tutade Turi Soha basically is an invocation of kindness, that we all are able to act in a potently kind manner. That's it. It's just a loving wish. So we're going to practice this in a distinctly non-dual way. We're not going to push or pull at perils or blessings. We're just going to wish that every 12 hours or so we watch mind's antics and rest in its non-graspable nature. As we breathe in, we're going to silently and mentally recite this wish, which applies to all circumstances and all experiences. And as we exhale, we're going to physically relax as best we can while chanting the 10-syllable mantra 4 times per breath for a total of 4 breaths per set for a total of 4 sets. Om Tade Du Nade Duri Suwa, 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 Om Tade Du Nade Duri Suwa. Om Tade Du Nade Duri Suwa, 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 Om Tade Du Nade Duri Suwa. Om Tade Du Nade Duri Suwa, 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 Om Tade Du Nade Duri Suwa. Om Tade Du Nade Duri Suwa, 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 Om Tade Du Nade Duri Suwa. Tareru Nane Nure Sowa. Om 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 Tareru Nane Nure Sowa. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 3 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's second lesson and meditation. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.